Today we are going to be introduced to lesson 2.1, solve equations with rational coefficients. Complete your work on a separate sheet of paper and remember to keep it for tomorrow when we're doing our notes. Our essential question, what is equivalence? Our Common Core state standards, 8.EE7, solve linear equations in one variable. 8.EE.7a, give examples of linear equations in one variable with one solution, infinite many solutions, or no solutions. 8.EE.7b, solve linear equations with rational number coefficients, including equations whose solutions require expanding expressions using the distributive property and collecting like terms. The mathematical practices: 1. Make sense of problems and persevere in solving them. 3. Construct viable arguments and critique the reasoning of others. 4. Model with mathematics. And 7. Look for and make use of structure. What will we learn today? To solve equations using the inverse property of multiplication, and to solve equations with rational coefficients. Two vocabulary words for this lesson: multiplicative inverse. Multiplicative inverse is two numbers with a product of 1, such as 3/4 and 4/3. So in other words, you take 3/4 times 4/3, you get 12 over 12, which equals 1. So the product of these two fractions is 1. We usually call these reciprocals. Okay. Coefficient, the numerical factor of a term that contains a variable. So the variable in this example here is the x. The coefficient is the number, the numerical factor that is next to that variable. In this case, what this means is 3 is being multiplied by x. Here's our first key concept: inverse property of multiplication. The product of a number and its multiplicative inverse, again, we can also call that reciprocal. The multiplicative inverse is 1. Two more examples here. We have 7/8 times 8/7. If we cross cancel, the 8's cross cancel each other and we're left with 1. The 7's cross cancel each other and we're left with 1. 1 times 1 over 1 times 1, or 1. Same thing happens, notice, when it's negative. Both of these terms are negative, so that's why it's multiplicative inverse. Negative 3/2 times negative 2/3 will equal 1. Our first example, solve 3/4 times c equal to 18, and they want us to check our solution. Okay. Before we go into this problem, some of you this may be the first time you're being introduced to variables. What we're having here is 3/4 times c, that's equal to 18. The goal of any math problem is to always isolate the variable. When you isolate the variable, which in this case is c, you're going to get your answer. So in order to isolate this variable, let me write the problem over here again. 3/4 times c equals 18. When we're multiplying a variable, in this case the variable c, by a fraction, we are going to multiply both sides. Whatever you do to one side, you have to do to the other. We're going to multiply by the inverse, the multiplicative inverse, or the reciprocal. In this case, the reciprocal of 3/4 is 4/3. So we're going to multiply both sides by 4/3. Cross canceling cancels the 3, we're left with the 1. Cross canceling the 4's, we're left with 1. 1 times 1 over 1 times 1 is 1. And the c is now isolated, or it's on its own. So now we have 18 times 4/3. When we're dealing with fractions and whole numbers, we can always make a whole number into a fraction. And now I'm going to see if I can cross cancel. Now, I know that 18 or 3 can be multiplied to get into 18. So I'm going to cross cancel by 3's. So 18 divided by 3 I know is 6. 3 divided by 3 is 1. So now I'm left with 6 times 4 over 1. 6 times 4 equals 24 over 1, or just 24. So in this case, C is equal to 24. Now they are asking us to check this. So let me make myself some room over here to check this. I'm going to take the 3/4, multiply that by 24. Will that give me 18? So as I work it out, once again, I can do the cross canceling. 24 over 1. I know 4 goes into 4 one time. 4 goes into 24 6 times. So I'm left with 3 times 6 over 1, which is 18. And we know that 18 equals 18. So my answer of C equals 24 checks out. Make sure, boys and girls, when you're doing these problems, you want to check your answer to make sure that you are 100% correct. Our next example, solve 1 1/2 times S equal to 16 and 1/2. And we're going to check our solution. So what I'm going to start off with this 1 1/2 times S, I'm going to change my fractions into improper fractions. And the way I do that is multiply the 2, or my denominator, times my whole number, which is 2, add the numerator. So I have 3/2 times S. Do the same thing on the right hand side of the equation. 16 times 2 is 32, plus 1, I have 32/2. Like example 1, I'm going to multiply by the multiplicative inverse, or the reciprocal. The reciprocal of 3/2 is 2/3. The 2's and the 3's cancel out on the left hand side, so S is equal to, simplify the right hand side, the 2's cancel each other. I know 3 can go into 33 11 times and cancel out the 3. So I'm left with 11 times 1 over 1 times 1, which is 11. So let me double check my answer to make sure that that's what I get. And I'm going to use my improper fractions. Makes it easier. So 3/2 times 11, does that equal 33/2? Change this into a fraction so I can multiply. 3 times 11 is going to be 33. 2 times 1, again, I'm multiplying the numerator. Multiply the denominators now. 2 times 1, 2. Does that equal 32/2? Yes, it does. So my answer is S is equal to 11. For our next step, we're going to be solving equations with decimal coefficients. In the equation, 3 and 1500ths is equal to 4500ths times n. The coefficient of n is a decimal. To solve an equation with the decimal coefficient, divide each side of the equation by the coefficient. So we're going to divide. So we take 3.15 equal to 0.45 times n. And again, our goal is to isolate the variable. So I'm going to divide, because right here we're multiplying. 0.45 times n. We do the opposite, which is division. So I'm going to take 0.45 on both sides. And what I get is, when I take 3.15 divided by 0.45, n is equal to 7. And I can check that. I can plug in the 7 to 0.45 times 7. That gives me 3.15. So my answer is n equals 7.